Between 2024 and 2025, Canada's 40 richest billionaires increased their combined wealth by almost $95 billion. Not $95 million, $95 billion in 1 year. To put that in perspective, $95 billion is more than Canada's entire annual defense budget. It is more than the GDP of several countries. And it happened during a year when the average Canadian household savings rate was 4.4%, meaning most Canadians were barely saving anything at all. According to statistics, Canada's report released on April 13, 2026, the income gap between the top 40% and bottom 40% of Canadian households reached 46.7 percentage points in 2025. The widest since records began in 1999. According to Oxfam Canada's January 2026 report, the richest 1% of Canadians, those with a net worth of $7 million or more, hold nearly $3.9 trillion in wealth, almost as much as the bottom 80% combined. And according to the Parliamentary Budget Office, the richest 1% controls approximately 24.3% of Canada's total wealth, nearly $3.5 trillion. The Thompsons were the richest family in Canada in 2025, with a net worth of $90.2 billion. They were also the richest family in 1999. The same family, 26 years later, still at the top, and substantially richer. This is not an accident. It is not luck. It is 5 specific mechanisms that compound wealth at the top while wages stagnate at the bottom. This video names every one of them and shows you how to use the same mechanisms on any income. Before we name the 5 mechanisms, there is one foundational concept that explains all of them. Because once you understand it, the entire picture of wealth inequality in Canada clicks into place. The wealthy get richer because they own assets. The rest get poorer, in relative terms, because they sell time. Here's the difference. When you go to work, you sell hours of your time in exchange for money. The moment those hours are sold, they are gone. You cannot sell the same hour twice. Your income stops the moment you stop working. When you own an asset, a share of a business, a piece of real estate, a bond, that asset generates returns whether you work or not. It earns while you sleep. It compounds while you rest. You can own the same asset simultaneously with thousands of other people without diminishing anyone's share of its returns. This structural difference between income that requires your time and income that doesn't is the engine of every wealth gap in Canadian history. Statistics Canada's data confirms this with precision. During the first quarter of 2025, the top 20% of Canadians by income benefited from rising investment income, while the bottom 20% saw wages stagnate. 2/3 of all property income in Canada, meaning money received from investments, rents from real estate, and other financial assets, was earned by the top 20% of Canadian households alone. The lowest income 40% of Canadian households don't own much property or other investments. Their income comes almost entirely from wages. And wages, in Canada in 2025, are growing slower than inflation, meaning their real purchasing power is declining. The top 20% don't need to work more hours to get richer. Their assets grow automatically. The bottom 40% can only earn more by selling more hours, which are finite. That structural divide, assets versus time, is the root of every mechanism this video will explain. Your action step. Ask yourself, what percentage of your total income comes from assets, investments, dividends, rental income, versus from selling your time? If the answer is close to 0, the rest of this video shows you the exact mechanisms to change that. Here are the first 3 mechanisms that compound wealth at the top, and the 2026 data that proves each one. Mechanism 1. Compound interest, working at scale. The rule of 72 works the same way at $10,000 as it does at $10 million. But the dollar outcomes are incomparably different. At 8% annual return, $10,000 doubles to $20,000 in 9 years. That's $10,000 gained. At 8% annual return, $10 million doubles to $20 million in 9 years. That's $10 million gained. Same percentage, same time. Incomparably different absolute outcome. The Thompson family's net worth of $90.2 billion, growing at even a modest 5% annually, generates $4.51 billion per year in passive wealth growth. No work required. No additional investment decisions. Just the mathematics of percentage applied to a large base. For most Canadians, compound interest produces meaningful wealth over long periods. For the ultra-wealthy, it produces billions. The mechanism is identical. The base is different. And the base compounds the gap automatically. Mechanism 2. Asset price inflation, the wealth gap widening machine. The richest Canadians hold the majority of their wealth in financial assets: stocks, private equity, businesses, and real estate. When asset prices rise, as they have dramatically in Canada over the past decade, the holders of those assets become proportionally richer. The net wealth held by homeowners in principal residences across Canada was $5.8 trillion in 2023. Those with the most expensive properties, concentrated in the top income brackets, captured the largest absolute gains from price appreciation. In 2025, the S&P 500 returned approximately 17.7%. The TSX was up over 31% year over year. The Canadians who owned significant financial assets at the start of 2025 ended the year dramatically richer, without earning a single additional employment dollar. The Canadians who owned no financial assets, the bottom 40%, experienced those market gains as irrelevant to their personal financial position. Rising financial markets widen the wealth gap automatically. Every year, markets are positive. Mechanism 3. Concentrated ownership of oligopolistic industries. Many of Canada's richest Canadians derive their wealth from corporations in the most concentrated sectors of the economy: telecommunications, food, and energy. As Oxfam notes, TELUS, Bell, and Rogers, the Big Three, are an oligopoly that charges Canadians some of the highest cell phone rates in the world. The Westons, with Galen Weston holding a personal net worth of $20.6 billion in 2025, up 14% from the previous year, derive wealth substantially from Loblaw Companies and George Weston Limited. These businesses operate in Canada's grocery sector with significant market concentration. Oligopolistic market structures allow companies to maintain pricing power that preserves profit margins, producing consistent returns to shareholders regardless of economic conditions. The owners of these businesses are not primarily affected by competition. The consumers, most Canadians, absorb the premium pricing. Your action step: look at the businesses you spend the most money with each month. How many of them operate in concentrated or oligopolistic markets? Your spending is systematically concentrated in sectors where a small number of wealthy families hold the dominant ownership positions. Here are the final two mechanisms, and these are the ones that most financial content never discusses clearly, because they exist in the policy and tax structure rather than in the markets. Mechanism 4. The tax system rewards capital over labor. As covered in the tax system video on this channel, the Canadian tax code treats different types of income very differently. and the treatment systematically favors people who earn income from capital rather than labor. Employment income, the income most Canadians earn, is taxed at the full marginal rate. In Ontario, at $100,000, that's approximately 43.41% on the next dollar earned. Capital gains, the profit from selling an appreciated investment, have a 50% inclusion rate. Only half the gain is added to taxable income. The effective capital gains tax rate in Ontario, at the top bracket, is approximately 26.76%. KPMG 2026, roughly half the employment income rate. Eligible dividends from Canadian corporations, taxed at approximately 29.5% at the top Ontario bracket, also significantly below the employment income rate. The practical implication: a wealthy Canadian who earns $500,000 in capital gains pays approximately 26.76% in combined tax on that income. A salaried professional earning $500,000 in employment income pays approximately 53.53%, the Ontario top marginal rate. Same $500,000. The capital owner pays roughly half the tax rate of the person who earned it through work. The lifetime capital gains exemption, sheltering up to $1,250,000 in capital gains from the sale of qualifying small business shares, adds a further structural advantage to business owners when they exit. Mechanism 5. Intergenerational wealth transfer and the compounding of advantage. The richest families in Canada tend to remain the richest families across generations. The Thompsons in 1999 and 2025. The Westons across multiple decades. This is not coincidence. It is the mechanics of wealth transfer. Wealthy parents provide their children with expensive private educations that open specific career doors, down payment gifts that allow the next generation to enter housing markets at lower leverage, access to investment capital that can be deployed from a young age, professional networks that create career and business opportunities, and direct wealth transfer through gifts and inheritance. The Parliamentary Budget Office modeling found the richest 1% controls 24.3% of Canada's wealth. That concentration is self-reinforcing. Each generation of wealthy families starts from a substantially higher base than their peers, allowing compound interest to operate on a larger starting position from birth. Parental co-signing of first-time buyer mortgages has risen from 4% in 2004 to roughly 11% in 2025, nearly tripling. This is the intergenerational wealth transfer mechanism made visible in mortgage data. The children of wealthy homeowners can buy. The children of renters face the 9 times price-to-income ratio alone. Your action step: understand which of these 5 mechanisms you currently have access to. The TFSA shields capital gains from the CRA entirely. The RRSP reduces your marginal rate on contributions. Building any asset position, however small, begins the compounding process. The mechanisms aren't exclusive to billionaires. They are available at any scale. Here is the most important thing to understand about everything this video has shown you. Every single mechanism that makes rich Canadians richer is available to any Canadian, at any scale. The Thompson family's wealth compounds at 5%, whether they have $90 billion or $90,000. The mechanism is identical. The base is different. The tax treatment of capital gains that saves wealthy Canadians millions in tax also saves you money when your TFSA investments grow tax-free. The TFSA doesn't just reduce the capital gains disadvantage, it eliminates it entirely. Every dollar of capital gain inside a TFSA is taxed at exactly the same rate as a billionaire's gain inside a properly structured holding company. 0. Here's the complete map of how each mechanism applies at any income level. Mechanism 1. Compound interest, available at any scale. $500 per month at 8% for 30 years equals $745,179, tax-free in a TFSA. The percentage gain is identical to the billionaires. The base is smaller, but the mechanism is the same. Mechanism 2. Asset price inflation. When the TSX rose 31.63% in the year to June 2026, every Canadian who owned a TSX Index ETF participated in those gains. Not at $90 billion scale, but proportionally, the same percentage gain on whatever position they held. Mechanism 3. Oligopolistic returns. You can invest in the very companies charging you premium prices. BCE, TELUS, Rogers all pay dividends. Loblaw Companies pays a dividend. The oligopolistic pricing power that frustrates you as a consumer generates consistent returns for shareholders, including retail investors who own these companies through ETFs like VDY or XEI. Mechanism 4. Tax treatment of capital. The TFSA eliminates capital gains tax entirely, regardless of your income level. The RRSP reduces your marginal rate on contributions. At $70,000 Ontario income, a $10,000 RRSP contribution saves you approximately $3,000 in tax. The same tax-favored treatment available to wealthy Canadians is codified in the same registered accounts available to every Canadian over 18. Mechanism 5. Intergenerational transfer. You cannot change who your parents were, but you can change what you pass to the next generation. A Canadian who builds $750,000 in a TFSA and passes it to their children creates a starting base that the next generation compounds from, breaking a generational cycle that may have previously offered no such foundation. The critical difference in scale, not mechanism, a household earning $93,000, Canada's median, that saves 15% of gross income equals $13,950 per year. At 8% annual return over 30 years, inside a TFSA equals $1,311,000, tax-free. That is not $90 billion, but it is generational wealth for a median income family, built using the same mechanisms, inside the same registered accounts, with the same compound interest mathematics. Your action step: identify which of the 5 mechanisms you are currently using. Then identify which ones you could activate this week. The TFSA and compound interest are available right now. The dividend income from Canada's oligopolistic companies is available the moment you buy VDY. The intergenerational advantage begins the moment you start building. Let's make this concrete, because the 5 mechanisms are not abstract. They produce real, measurable outcomes at every income level. Here is the math. At the national median income of $93,000, saving 15%, 30 years, $93,000 times 15% equals $13,950 per year, equals $1,163 per month into a TFSA invested in a low-cost S&P 500 or TSXE TF at 8% annual return. 10 years. $213,400. 20 years, $690,300. 30 years, $1,311,000, tax-free. Mechanism 1, compound interest, working on a growing base. Mechanism 2, asset price appreciation, participating in every market gain. Mechanism 4, tax treatment, eliminated entirely by the TFSA, adding the RRSP refund loop. At $93,000 Ontario income, 18% ERRSP contribution limit equals $16,740. A $10,000 RRSP contribution generates approximately $3,000 in tax refunds at approximately 30% marginal rate. Reinvested in the TFSA, $3,000 per year at 8% over 30 years adds approximately $367,000 to the final portfolio. Combined 30-year outcome on $93,000 median income with TFSA plus RRSP plus refund loop, approximately $1.5 million to $1.7 million, tax-free. The dividend income from Canada's oligopolies, $200,000 in VDY at 4.5% yield equals $9,000 per year in completely tax-free dividend income inside a TFSA. Every dollar of that income came from the same pricing power and market concentration that frustrates most Canadians as consumers. The transformation is complete when you stop being only a consumer of oligopolistic services and become a shareholder in them. What this looks like in practice: a 30-year-old Canadian earning $93,000 who maxes their TFSA annually, $7,000, in XEQT, contributes $10,000 to RRSP and reinvests the refund, adds dividend ETF exposure through VDY as the portfolio grows, enables DRIP on all positions, steps up contributions by 50% of every raise, arrives at age 60 with approximately $1.5 million to $2 million in tax-free wealth, generating $67,500 to $90,000 per year in passive income at 4.5% dividend yield alone. Of course, you do not have to wait until 60 to pull your investments. Let's say you started investing at 20 years of age instead of 30. This early start would allow you to retire earlier. The most important thing is to start investing. When you pull out your investments is up to you. A lot of people would rather have $500,000 in their 30s rather than $1.5 million in their 60s. Your action step: calculate your own 30-year outcome using this framework. Take your annual savings target, your time horizon, and 8% return. Run it through any compound interest calculator. The number that comes back is what the 5 mechanisms produce for you, starting today. Let's come back to where we started. Canada's 40 richest billionaires grew their wealth by $95 billion in 1 year. 89 Canadian billionaires exist in 2025. Their wealth growing over 20% in a single year. The top 1% hold $3.9 trillion, almost as much as the bottom 80% combined. The income gap is the widest since records began. These numbers are structural. 5 mechanisms: compound interest at scale, asset price inflation, concentrated oligopolistic ownership, preferential tax treatment of capital, and intergenerational wealth transfer, work together in a self-reinforcing system that makes existing wealth grow automatically. None of that is changing soon. But here is the part that matters for every Canadian watching this video. The same 5 mechanisms are available at any income level, not at $95 billion scale, but proportionally using the same compounding mathematics, the same asset appreciation, the same oligopolistic dividend income, the same tax-free registered accounts. A 30-year-old Canadian earning the national median income, saving 15%, maxing their TFSA, contributing to their RRSP, collecting dividend income from Canada's banks and telecoms through VDY, arrives at 60 with $1.5 million to $2 million in tax-free wealth, generating $67,500 to $90,000 per year in passive income. The rich get richer because they own assets. You can own assets. They compound at 8%. Your assets compound at 8% too. Their gains are tax-free inside holding companies. Your TFSA gains are tax-free too. Their dividends come from Canada's most dominant businesses. VDY pays dividends from those same businesses. The scale is different. The mechanisms are identical. Stop being only a consumer of Canada's economy. Start being an owner of it.